Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about some of the miracle stories that are happening right here in our own city, in our own state, every day. My name is Tony Kausha, and the title of our show is Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles. Please note, this show is not about religion, and we're not trying to change anyone's religion, and we're not trying to get you to join any religion. It's just about miracle stories. I don't know of any religion on the planet that doesn't talk about miracles. That's why religions begin, because they have something that's telling them there's really a God. But we're not going to get into that. We're going to just talk about miracles and leave the decisions about all that up to you. So we don't care what religion you are. We just want to talk about miracles. If you are an atheist, I think you'll enjoy the program as well, although I can't guarantee you'll remain an atheist very long after you hear many convincing stories, coincidence kinds of stories about miracles. You can email me your own stories if you wish. We'll try to use all we can on the show. I can't guarantee we will, depending on volume and time, but you're welcome to send your stories on to us, and we will mention them when we can. You can send them to the following email address. But please notice that if we do use your story, we won't mention your name. We'll keep you anonymous. And we suggest that in your story, when you send it to us, don't use your correct name. That way anyone listening will not be able to figure out that it was you that sent the story in. The email address you can send your stories to is very easy to remember. It consists of 2 words and 3 numbers. The first word is Tony, spelled Tony, and the second word is and, spelled A-N-D, and the numbers are 777. So once again, the name is Tony and 777 at AOL.com. Well, let us begin. Our first coincidence miracle today is from someone who relates that they had attended an important business meeting with some clients, and when they left the meeting, got to their car, they got an inspiration to go back into the building and present 2 other points that they did not mention in the presentation because they were very important points to raise and make sure that everybody understood these other 2 points which were left out. And so the person was embarrassed to think walking back in and disturbing the meeting because after he left, they were continuing to discuss the project. So he felt embarrassed. So he said a prayer and he asked for wisdom. And he got the wisdom to just go back into the building and wait in the lobby, in the waiting room. They had a waiting room in the lobby. And sure enough, they went in. It took some courage, but they say after they mustered up their courage, they went back into the building, sat in the lobby, and as soon as they sat down, the meeting inside broke up and the people walked out toward the lobby. And he was able to say, oh, by the way, there are 2 other quick points, and he brought up the other 2 points, and the group was delighted and thrilled because those were very important things that concluded their decision to go ahead with the program. So it's another case of, God inspiring us. We feel embarrassed to do something, and God takes care of the embarrassment because he was just waiting in the lobby, perfectly timed, and nobody made any big deal about it at all. Our next coincidence miracle is from a woman who tells us she was having some personal family problems, and she was inspired to call a friend of hers that she has often gotten advice from, but she was embarrassed because she's asked for a lot of advice, and this other person has been fine, helping them with advice, but she feels like she's always putting this other person out of the way and not reciprocating, hasn't done anything, on the giving end, so they were embarrassed about it. And some of the topics they wanted to talk about were even embarrassing. So it was on their mind, and they were inspired to call their friend, but they didn't do it the first day. It got stronger on the second day. They didn't do it on the second day. And then they tell us that on the third day, around lunchtime, they were leaving their office around lunchtime, and as they walked out the door, the friend that they had avoided calling for 2 days was walking into the building through the same doorway. So they came face to face, and they decided to go to lunch together. And it was a beautiful experience because now nonchalantly, very comfortably, they just got into the topics that she needed to talk about. And she relates how it was perfect medicine for her. It solved her stresses and anxiety. And the fact that, she got inspired to call this person, and the person arrived because they had some other business to attend to in the same building that the person worked in. It just was a tremendous coincidence, obviously designed by God. The perfect timing of people, meeting at a doorway is really perfectly timed. You can just imagine. How often have we talked about this over the last 2 years, the perfect timing of God. And that's one of the ways you notice miracles, because the timing of the events, if there's something with 5 steps in it, the perfect timing of the 5 steps happening in the right succession, in the right moments, is really unbelievable. And this is a good case. They met as she was coming out of the building, he was going into the building. 5 minutes difference in time, they would have missed each other. So it's a great miracle story for us who need to be convinced that God is working in our lives. Our next coincidence miracle is from someone who was at a fundraising event. There was an audience listening to a presentation for fundraising, and the person was inspired to make a donation and had a certain amount in mind. They were inspired to give a certain amount as a donation. And they wanted to be sure that God was inspiring them, that God was approving that, make that donation to this charity. And so they got an inspiration to think about fleecing. We've talked about that on our show, and it's in our books. Fleecing is a way in the Bible where people want to be sure that they're doing God's will. So they ask God for inspirations and directions, to ask God to show them that they are making the right decision or not. And it's a pretty elaborate process. You ask God to put it in your mind some steps that you will notice. Like you might say, well, okay, if it's raining by noon, then I'll do it. Or if it stops raining by 6 p.m., then I'll do it. People do things like that because they ask God to inspire them with, how will I know that you want me to do this thing? And depending on the severity or the importance of the topic, if it was brain surgery or heart surgery, the clue, the sign that you ask God to give you might be very elaborate because it's a serious decision. But for minor things like, should I make a donation to this charity, it's somewhat minor. If sounds like a good charity, the question is, should I give the money to them or give it to another charity instead? So that's the level of depth. You're going to give a charitable donation to someone, and you're asking, should I give it to this organization? So this person asked God for an inspiration, and they got inspired. They said they got inspired that if the person sitting in front of them went out the left door when they left, then they would make the donation. If the person in front of them went out the right door, the right side of the building when they left, then they would not make the donation. And that was their inspiration. It was very simple. And they said it wasn't a lot of money, so it wasn't a real major decision, but they did want a clue that they were doing correctly. And sure enough, the person in front of them went out the left door, so they went up and made the donation. And they heard about a week later how tremendously impactful their donation was, and it made a big difference because other people heard that they donated, and it caused other people to donate, etc. And it brought such delight to the organization. So you see, asking God for these clues, inspirations, and doing these simple things helps you get confirmations and feeling confident about doing God's will. And our book has 12 cases in the Bible where people did use fleecing like this. You can read about Judges chapter 6 and Genesis chapter 24. So again, in the Bible, Genesis chapter 24 and Judges chapter 6, you'll see 2 of the 12 fleeces that are used in the Bible that we found, and we have them in our 2 books. So if you go to our website and Google our website, you can listen to our first book for free, and you'll hear all 12 of the fleeces. So the website is wcatradio.com/miracles/ one more time, wcatradio.com/miracles/. Our next coincidence miracle is about a man who was out driving, and he passed by a recently constructed store that he had not shopped in yet. It was a new store in the area, and there were a couple things he needed to pick up, so he got inspired to pull in and go in and browse and possibly get the items he wanted there. So he went inside to browse, and while he was browsing up and down the aisles, he met a man who had had casual meetings with like 2 years earlier. This was again during the COVID problem we were having in the year 2020 and 2021, 2022. So during that time span, they had lost touch, and they were casual friends. They had met somewhere else somehow and knew each other. I guess they met probably in another store somewhere, or maybe they were in the same office building. I don't know, but they had a casual friendship. They say hello when they see each other. They maybe talk about the weather. Maybe they talk about something that was in the news that day. So they had a casual relationship, and they didn't have each other's phone numbers and the correct spellings of their names. I just knew their first names. So this was a unique case where they met again, and they got their phone numbers now and the correct spelling, and they are famous friends. And they're relating the story that they have really a great friendship now, and it happened because they were inspired to just go into this new store. Both of them were in the store for the first time. It was a new store, and both of them had been inspired to stop in same day, same time. Perfect coincidence miracle. Our next coincidence miracle is from a man who tells us that during the Easter season, during the Easter holiday, they heard in their prayer service at their church that Jesus, when he was on the cross, before he finally passed away in the final moments, said something like, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" And he always thought that statement, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" He always thought that statement meant that Jesus felt forsaken. He felt unnoticed, abandoned by his friends, abandoned by God himself, God his Father. So it always troubled him that Jesus was on the cross and he was saying he was forsaken, because none of us wants to think that when we're in tough times and we need God's help, that he won't be there for us. So he was inspired to talk to his minister, and he found out that Jesus was reciting Psalm 22. So if you go to the Bible and you read Psalm 22, you'll find that the words in Psalm 22, there are words that say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" But if you read the rest of the psalm, you'll notice that it's really the story of a Messiah, a Savior, who's being beaten by people, tortured by people, and he's praying that prayer during the torturing, etc. And so the bottom line is Psalm 22 is a summary. It's a summary of what Jesus went through in his sufferings. It's a summary prayer. It's a summary historical story. In other words, it's a recap. If you read Psalm 22, you'll be reminded that it's talking about Jesus and the sacrifice he made of giving up his life for the sake of many other people's sinfulness. So Psalm 22 is well worth reading, so you'll see it's not Jesus being forsaken, it's Jesus just reciting the Psalms, which the Jewish men did in those days. They would walk around and recite the Psalms together as they were walking together. God bless you all. I'll talk to you next week.